Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Chance to Ask session. Today we're asking tech stage managers, tech ASMs, some burning questions from people. What we're going to do is we're going to start off by introducing our panelists today. We've got the wonderful Mochan and Adrian Emmerson. If you want to just tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you do, what you're currently doing, that'd be fab. So, Ashley?
My background is production management, technical management, and also technical stage management. I mainly work in the West End on shows which either have effects or puppetry, and I'm currently working on Death Drop as an SFX specialist at the moment.
Go for it,
so I'm Adrian, and I am generally a touring technical stage manager. I do a lot of work with Mischief Theatre for all their touring shows, and along with Bill Kenwright's as well touring. I do some of their musicals for them. So yeah, spend most of my time on the road as a TSM.
Exciting. So how do you personally find the dynamic of, I mean, Ashley, you're predominantly, I guess, long run venue based, and Adrian, you're more touring based. So how do you find that dynamic? How did you find that was what you wanted to sort of settle into? Or is that something that you want to change in the future? Ashley?
For me, I'm not long runs as a thing. I'm like short runs, but in the West End, so with 3-month stints. I basically started it because when I was at uni, I started stage management. I moved into production management to learn more technical aspects. And then from that, I've worked my way into different places. And most shows at the moment are getting more and more technical and need somebody with a drill and a technical mind on stage to fix certain things.
Adrian?
For me, I'd say that, well, the first show I did out of uni was a tour, and I've pretty much just toured since then for the past 7 years now. So just jumping in, and at the moment, one tour is starting to come to a close. There's offers coming in to go, do you want to come and start rehearsals for this? So it's just ongoing.
I think that makes sense, doesn't it? So how long have you guys been in your sort of chosen career paths? So, I mean, did you both graduate from university? Did you go to drama school? What was kind of your path into what you're doing at the moment?
So I went to a college that specialises in performing arts, which was meant to be a BA honours degree. I didn't complete the BA. I left after 2 years. I didn't do the third year because for me, it was the third year was too much theory based, and I'm much more of a practical, hands-on person. And so I just left to join. I got offered a job, so I went and did that, and progressed my career through doing that.
I did the other way. I did a BA as well at college, then moving into a drama school. I went to Central. But at Central, most of the time I worked in a theatre as crew, then worked my skills up between the both of them.
So do you find as regards to technical stage management, you're more of a hands-on person? Do you find that it's not necessarily the theory behind things, it's the physically being able to do things in the moment that's the most important factor?
I think yes, but you need to know the theory of how something is working before you can fix it most of the time. And if you're on a show, you'll know how this revolve is going to work if you need to fix it quickly. You need the physical and theory behind it, I would say.
It's also definitely depending on who you are as well and how best you learn. For me, I can't learn out of books as well. I would need the physical. I learn better with, like, say if you are fixing a revolve, I'd need the revolve there and in front of me to be hands-on, and that's how I run.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my degree wasn't actually that theory based. Was the thing we got more to know practical skills.
Yeah, Okay, so I mean, with regards to training, then I guess it proves that there are different ways to sort of do almost the same path. So in that sort of vein, so what is it that a technical stage manager does that you think makes them a technical stage manager?
I mean,
It's a
that's
broad question.
I think it's quite a broad question because it depends on the show, I would say. Having a technical mind and having will help you on different scales and different shows. I don't necessarily always work on technical shows, so I split my time in between. But as I was saying earlier, like special effects, I've done lots of shows that have lots of blood or special effects that I needed, which we didn't necessarily know until we got there.
So it's almost a case of bringing that practical hands-on experience to the room and to almost a department that is sometimes less technically involved, I guess. So is it that kind of the stage side of the stage side equivalent of what your other technical departments are doing, or do you see it as more of a kind of cohesive stage management role who also works in that technical side?
I'd say it's still in a way still a bit of a developing title or developing role. When I first went to uni, it had been a technical stage manager hadn't been used for quite some time, and now more shows are getting more technical and they need somebody with that mindset on a show. It's completely different on tour, of course, but in town you didn't get tech ASMs or tech SMs for quite a while.
Yeah, for me on tour, it's the case of it is a new role, definitely a new role in the last few years that's coming around and progressing, and it's because the sets are definitely becoming more technical as technology is being developed in the world and everything. So on stage, whereas maybe in the past you may have had your sort of like LX team or sound team that would maybe jump in on problems to help out, but because it's getting so progressively big and large scale, that you need a specific person in order to jump in if an error happens during a show and you need someone there to fix it there and then. Then that's where I think this role is now developing.
It's a quick fixing, and
yes.
You don't need to call somebody else. There's somebody on the side of the stage already to do it.
So on a typical show, what do your duties involve? Do you run a track? Do you work more as sort of a self-contained department, just looking out for trouble when it arises, or are you doing multiple things and then sort of diverting from your typical show track when things crop up?
For me, sorry, you go. For me, I normally do a track and then I will get diverted into jumping into something else, and then coverers and split around that way, depending on the size of show.
Yes, that's the same. That's the same for me as well. It's very much that you're still. I'm still predominantly the stage manager, so I still have my stage management track, as well as then the technical side that comes with it to jump onto when things go wrong.
So I guess as a sort of as a follow on from that, what is your favorite part of your job? Is it that moment where you manage to fix something without anybody knowing, or is there an equally rewarding part of the job that sort of people don't quite see on the surface?
After you.
After you. For me, a lot of my rewarding parts come from before the show's happening, in rehearsals and things, being able to figure out how to make something work and make it easier for the cast or whatever in that circumstance. And yeah, of course, quick fixes on the stage are always good. But if you make it a puppet lighter or whatever for somebody without getting somebody else in, always makes me happy.
And for me, it is running my department and having my department throughout the tour and making our lives easier as we go. So, for instance, when we first started touring bank robbery for Mischief, we only had 3 trailers for the tour. We were ramming the sets onto the trailers, and get outs were finishing at about 5 a.m. in the morning, because we were trying to cram it onto 3 trucks and it didn't really fit. So sort of like looking after my staff on the show and making sure the show runs well that way is sort of like my favorite part of the job, in terms of a management role.
I guess that's kind of quite an interesting dynamic where, you know, Ashley's more kind of venue based and Adrian kind of works on those tours where you're in and out almost constantly. The challenges do vary, even within the same role. But I guess that's true of all members of a touring company. There's always those extra things that come up.
I mean, it is different because I'll be on the same show for about, I'll be on a show longer than he will, because I'll be on a show for about 9 months to a year, whereas you said you were going every 3 months.
I jumped from like 3 months to 6 month shows, depending on what, but also a lot of the time in town you won't have a technical ASM or a technical stage manager. You won't need that role. So I split my time a lot between automation and like stunts as well. Half back to half equity, you know, mixing the two.
So I guess that leads almost perfectly onto the question: is there another job that you do alongside your tech ASM, your tech SM role, that sort of either supplements what you do, works it hand in hand with what you do, or is completely different? Do you do anything completely outside of theatre, or is everything that you do sort of more focused on that kind of tech side of backstage?
Everything for me is to do with tech and backstage side of theatre, to do with work, sort of like everything tech. And I only really do technical stage management roles on tours for long contracts.
You sort of found the niche, I guess. In that sense, you found your kind of place in.
I think it's because it comes back to, because this is a growing role. So I don't think there's, now I've got a good few years of experience of the TSM role in touring theatre, and I don't think there's that many people necessarily that have got that modern day experience. So I'm finding it easier to get the work and then just to stay in that role, in that position, for me.
And it's like your role as a TSM and my role as a TSM will be again completely different to each other.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
because I generally will run TSMs on tour are also taking on roles from production carpenter as well. So production carpenters are Bill Kenwright's normally will run fit ups with 2 production carpenters. All their smaller shows now, they've got rid of the second production carpenter, and the TSM now takes that role on as well during fit up. And that's going to progress into the big musicals as well. They're going to move all the second production carpenters off the show and gradually push TSMs into those roles over the next few years.
So would you say then that the importance of multi-skilling as a younger stage manager is becoming increasingly important with the advent of the more technical stage management roles?
Yes, yes, and I reckon, I'm not sure, but except for the big scale tours, a lot of all the small scale tours and everything, stage management or a stage manager role will disappear, and it will become a technical stage management role. So
And
you will have to
do you
have
think
those extra skills.
do you think that's a money thing, or do you think that's because they realise that they can get more from their team if they employ technical?
It's all about money and cutting costs.
Isn't that the same answer to both questions? It's 6 of 1, is it not?
Well, exactly. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I would say getting more skills as a young stage manager is always better. It's always beneficial in the long run. Even if you're not a technical person, getting a skill, any skills that you can get will always be useful. Because even on shows, for instance, that have a small bit of blood, doing a blood workshop and knowing how to use blood and how to work with it will be more useful. And it's not necessarily a technical element.
So would you say that there are specific departments in which it's almost the most important to have an in-depth knowledge of? Would you say that kind of the automation side and the carpentry side is more important than lighting and sound? Or would you say that you have to have that basis of across all of the disciplines in order to sort of progress as a TSM?
I think
again, it's different.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah.
If you were to not necessarily rank your specialisms, but if you were to say your primary sort of areas which you'd feel most comfortable working within outside of the kind of traditional stage management role sphere, would you say that you could easily dabble in a little bit of lighting, a little bit of sound, automation, or would you say that you're kind of do you feel comfortable when you're asked to do those roles, or is it kind of you just have to refresh yourself, take a breather, and then go for it? Or do you feel like you're able to sort of tone switch quite easily?
Me myself, I reckon that I could jump in and out of departments and help and assist up to a level. It's not like obviously the Alex and the sound guys are much more it's their departments, but I can assist them and happy to in a fit up 1 minute be helping rigging lights and anything with that, or doing set and then jump in and help sound, especially if other departments are behind on their schedules and need a bit of extra assistance. Yeah.
Would you say that's true of you as well, Ashley?
I'd agree, but I would also say that in the places I work, that's not allowed.
Yeah.
When you're on tour, you can jump into different departments as a TSM or whatever. You won't be able to cover lighting or sound or automation when you're in a venue in town necessarily.
Sure.
But most of my skills are making intricate things work.
So
is what I get employed to do in those things.
Yeah. So you said that you also do little bits of automation and special effects. Is that something that you've developed because you've noticed there's a gap in the market for it, or is that something you've just been interested in and found that works for you?
My first job out of uni was automation, but I fell into it basically. From working at a Hampstead theatre, they needed somebody to move the show, so I just went into that, but never as a stage management side.
Sure.
Special effects does fall under stage management a lot more nowadays, or the running and maintaining of does. Especially it's kind of a grey area. Yes. Especially if magic goes wrong.
Yeah.
So do you find that sort of your as the years go by, do you find that your role has sort of diversified and become slightly larger year after year, or do you think that you found that we found a happy medium now for where the tech SM should sit within the production team? Or do you think that's going to keep changing and keep diversifying? I mean, I know it changes on a show by show basis. But do you think like the boundaries are clear for what a tech SM is responsible for, or do you think it's blurred?
I think it's, from my experience, I think it's blurred from working with different companies and different production managers, because some production managers have got different ideas about what this role entails. So one show that I tech stage managed for, I didn't have to do any of the get out. The curtain came down at the end of the show and I just left with the company. So like it's very odd.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is always going to be blurred between the producers and production managers, because it's never really a settled. I don't think it'll ever be a settled role, to be honest,
No,
because it's all show dependent on what you need for that.
and
I think what
budget.
might happen is more stage managers, title of stage manager, will be more technical in the end. So the whole shift of every show will have this knowledge.
So do you think that it's easy, not easy, but do you think that it's possible to be taken advantage of as a technical stage manager, perhaps more easily than other roles? Do you think people could possibly see the word tech on your role and decide that that's something that they want to sort of take advantage of? Or do you think that it's just a case of being as strong-willed as possible and you know, being assertive and knowing your personal role on that individual project?
I think in town you can't be taken advantage of necessarily, because there's the age-old argument of, is a tech stage manager, is it equity or bec 2? So people are very aware of what's going on, who they're employing to do what job and what job they're allowed to do.
For sure. Do you think that changes on tour, Adrian?
It certainly does change on tour, and it changes for me during rehearsal period, and companies, because, and it comes down to money and budget, is because for me, a technical stage manager is on a slightly higher pay than a stage manager. Therefore, you're paying for that service, or in some cases not paying for that service, but they're trying to creep it into the role. And
you're paying for that knowledge.
Yes, exactly. You are paying for the knowledge, and sometimes they're expecting the knowledge, or they know the knowledge is there, but aren't paying for it. And that's where they're trying to take advantage.
I think some people are taken advantage of by, as you're saying, employing ASMs or stage managers that are technical.
Yeah.
And then that's the level of difference in pay. It's the opposite way around, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that it's almost possible to fall into a technical stage manager or a technical ASM role without actually having that on your contract? Do you think that I mean, I guess in the touring world, it's probably a little bit more prevalent because, you know, you're limited on numbers of crew and you know, money is a little bit tighter, I guess, than a larger West End show. But would you say that it's possible to sort of slip into sort of a vicious cycle of especially, I guess, for most of the guys here who are sort of young stage managers and graduates, do you think it's possible to sort of be duped or tricked, or not even necessarily deliberately, into that role without sort of being asked?
I think it is possible to fall into as an ASM role and end up doing a lot of technical things, but then that lies with the people above you to notice and to support you. So your CM and your producers to realize what job you're doing. In my first musical in the West End, I was an ASM, and then during tech, the company manager realized what I was doing, then promoted me straight that day.
So it's a case of relying on those people higher up to I mean, I guess in a sense, to do their roles as well. You know, the company manager to realise that you are a valuable member of the company who is perhaps doing something that's above your pay grade, and work out if that's something feasible to sort of work with you on.
Yeah, and it's also from the higher up level realising what a technical role is as well. They realise that you're being more technical than you've employed to be, but not necessarily what they should be doing. You know, it's that fine line in between.
And I guess it's that age-old thing within stage management of communication. You know, if you're observing your company, if you're working with your company regularly, then you're going to notice that people are doing things, which I guess is sort of a a reason to be an advocate for kind of clear communication within the stage management team, and also a great bond within the stage management team as well. So with that kind of that thing, I mean, obviously, Ashley, you went to drama school. Adrian, you kind of decided that training wasn't the route for you. Do you think that within stage management training, there's a place for increasing multi-skilling? You know, more regular technical training for stage managers, or do you think that that's something that is learned once you get out there and working?
Well, my course for the first 2 years, I did a stage management and production management degree, but in the first 2 years we were covering, it was split into 4, so it was split into lighting, sound, stage management and production management, and you were expected to do all 4 subjects the whole 2 years. So through my training, I still got training in sort of lighting and sound and technical aspects.
For sure.
See, for me, I started drama school as a stage manager and realized I wanted more. For my BTEC, I realized I wanted to be more technical, so I ended up swapping courses. So I think there's ways around it, but yes, I think there is a place for more technical. It's just very hard for drama schools to actually do that in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
It all depends on the school you're going to as well.
It does, especially as a lot of people misunderstand the technical stage management role, and the fact that it's not technical as in the fact that you don't, although I do step in on tour, it's not to do with lighting or sound or like the main technical departments. It's to do with the specific technical elements of the set, and on stage. So lighting and sound is different subjects, sort of like.
Sure.
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations to that effect with people. The word tech is sometimes misleading in a tech stage manager or a tech swing. Like, people get very confused between the two, especially at a tech ASM level. But there is no other way of describing it, to be honest.
So it's almost more of a mechanical role in a sense than a technical role. You're kind of working on the physical things as opposed to.
In fact, you've said the word mechanical there, which is quite interesting. And, in Australia and New Zealand, they're actually technical stage managers are actually called head mechanicals. So they've actually they sort of like understand the role a little bit better to me, because the word mechanical is in the title.
So would you say that there's anything that you've done outside of the stage management sphere which has actually really helped you in your role as a tech SM? I know you know, people do all sorts of different things outside of what they do as hobbies, but I mean, I know, Adrian, you've been building a flight case. Do you find that physical actually building something is useful when it comes to getting out on the road and actually having to fix something in situ?
Especially to do with like woodwork and things like that. I've mainly done it because of boredom setting in over the last.
For sure.
And with lockdown too, finding something new to do. Sort of like, and it's just the way. I mean, it's also teaching myself new skills. For instance, I've been using. I brought myself a little compressor and a compressor nail gun, but I haven't really had much experience of using compressor power tools. So during lockdown too, I've been running and using them and building flight cases, like to try and develop those skills a bit more.
So it's sort of quite easy to keep your skills sharp, even in a non-stage management context, in the midst of lockdown, just by purely just playing with stuff.
And especially with like new tech equipment that comes out as well in sort of like day-to-day life, sort of like learning things about that helps. It's also understanding where technology is going to is heading towards as well in the future, and sort of like being ready to be hands-on and learn the new equipment that's being invented and brought to the industry.
Yeah. So I mean, you don't consider yourself a reader, but do you both still read up regularly on the new advances in what's happening? Is that something that you do, or do you find yourself sort of taking it as it comes in that sense?
I personally don't spend a lot of time reading up on new advances. I spend a lot of my time on different jobs, seeing what's happening and watching somebody else, especially in my younger days, watching how something was done. That's how I learnt my craft and my skill. And when the time is right, asking a question,
For sure.
and then learning what that is, rather than just thinking, oh, I can do that, figuring out how to do it first.
Would you say then, in a sense, that working with perhaps a venue tech is a really interesting way to sort of hone your TSM skills? Because I mean, I guess in the sense that the venue tech is kind of a rudimentary or a slightly differently skinned technical stage manager. They're responsible for multiple things. They're building, they're working with a larger team, but they are, in a sense, sort of doing not a mirror, but quite a similar thing to what you guys are doing out in the wider world.
Possibly, but I think more from my skills, looking at production managers and technical managers, look at what they were doing and how they were doing things, rather than how the venue itself was working.
For sure.
Looking at it from the top down.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Andy's asked an interesting question in that sense, asking how a technical stage manager differs from a technical manager, a prod LX, a tech swing, and a venue tech. And I guess we've already established that the word tech stage manager kind of could be interlaced with mech stage manager. But I mean, the difference between, I guess, a tech swing and a tech stage manager, the word tech plays a very, very different role in both of those those roles, right? So I mean, it might be worth possibly explaining how that word tech differs between different people.
Well, for me, my last tech swing role covered sound, lighting, but also high performance like stunts, which is not a stage management job necessarily, and that kind of side of things. So you wouldn't expect a stage manager on the shows that I do to do anything to do with lighting.
So I guess in a sense, then the key word in those individual roles is not necessarily tech. It's the second word. It's that stage. It's that swing. It's that the technical manager. When you add that word stage, it sort of defines where you are, your physical position in the theatre, but also what you're physically doing during the show, right? Which I think is quite an interesting point. So your stage side for most of the shows, your track, are you running a stage manager's track, so a slightly more kind of overarching track, or are you, when you're tracking a show, are you doing those kind of minutiae tasks, setting props, running around, or is it kind of more of a stage manager's track? Ashley?
I get mine. It's so different on every show. So yeah, a lot of the time, yes, running the bigger picture of the track, but a smaller show will require you to run props, sometimes costume changes, sometimes 6 mics. Mics unofficially, of course. So it changes so much. It's a very. I'm very one of those people that will just jump in and do anything, even if it's my job or not, if it needs to be done.
Adrian?
Yeah, no, I agree. It does change in every show, and yeah, it just changes so much.
Do you think perhaps the anatomy of a technical stage manager is somebody that is happy to jump in and help out with any department? Is it that confidence and the kind of the knowledge and the ability to tone switch? Is that is that kind of part of the anatomy of what a TSM does? Is it that you know, do you think that most of the TSMs that you've met and worked with are similar in that way?
Kind of argue that's the anatomy of a stage manager anyway, of any part of the department. You know, everybody that I've met is generally happy to help out when the show is running to keep that going. But as a technical, yes, your goal is never to have a show stop, in my opinion.
Yes, definitely. Never have a show stop.
I mean, talking about mics, is that something that you found yourself doing on the regular? Do you think that stage managers should at the very least be sort of versed in mic fitting? Is it a useful skill? I mean, it's sort of a more kind of specific point, but do you think it's a useful skill to have?
Fitting mics,
I think
yeah,
more.
definitely.
I was going to say, but also knowing how to compress air them, how to clean them during the show.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially when there's already another 2 or 3 mics that are gone and your sound team are running around like headless chickens already trying to chase.
Yeah,
and then,
you're much more often you'll have to clean a mic or get it out of a wig than you will have to fit it.
especially if you end up with your principal being a very sweaty man like Reed is, and Mike had to be cleaned every 30 seconds when you got him.
Yeah.
It was basically a rule: if he walks past you, give him a little spray.
So in a strange way, then it's sort of about the specifics of departments. There's a specific sort of chunk of each department that a stage manager should sort of have in their playbook. Do you think? Like, you know, I mean, having an overarching view of what the whole department does is great, but I think possibly having the hands-on skills to be able to do those individual tasks really well is as important.
Yeah, I think that's very important, but also knowing where your role lies as well. You know,
For sure.
As you're saying, walking past and giving somebody a spray will help the sound team, but it's ultimately their department. So not to overstep people.
So is that kind of treading the line of communication? It's sort of you're assisting when necessary, as opposed to becoming a part of that team.
And when asked, yes.
Yeah.
You create a rapport with the entire team, don't you? You'd never walk into a show on your first day and start spraying people's mics. You'd know that is fine. Your number 2 is happy for you to do that.
I guess it's developing that relationship with your show team on a show-by-show basis, which again is just one of those stage management skills that's so useful across the board, and probably I guess why stage managers are so good at kind of that tone switching, being able to just have a chat with anybody and having that link between, you know, cast and crew. Now, as a technical stage manager, I guess, do you find that your link to cast members is sort of distance because you're becoming more of that stage side role, or do you find that you're still able to create a really good bond with both cast and creatives and crew?
Personally, for me, I'd say no, because it's not often that you'll have a TSM and an SM. You know, it's a combined role rather than a distancing role.
For sure. Martin says that Adrian and Martin hold the record for a full run of a show across 3 countries without a show stop. That's pretty good. Bang in. There we go. What was your role on that show, Adrian? Do you know?
What was this? What did Martin say?
He says you and him hold the record for a full run of a show across 3 countries without a show stop.
Oh, yeah, that was Tech ASM.
Okay.
That was the play that goes wrong, I believe.
The question is, did the play go wrong? Were you doing live fixes, or was it a very seamless?
Yeah, no, we were doing live fixes all the time. Especially with the hydraulic ram that operates the tilting ramp. Those of you that know the show, only now, because we've just put a new set into the West End for the play that goes wrong. But the West End was just done on a counterweight system, so it was just it was mechanical, and it was just you just pull a pin out, and then it just drops to the next point where it can hit the next pin. You just pull that out, and then it will drop to the next point. But on the tour, it was a electrical ram that would just go up and force the ramp down on the other side. And there's so many problems with this electrical RAM. And all I can say is that it looked like it had come out of someone's garden shed when it arrived in the house, being put together. So there were a lot of fault findings, especially in rehearsal room with it, because even though with this electric RAM, the RAM couldn't take the weight of 4 cast members and all the furniture that was on top of this platform. So we had to add a counterweight onto the back of the ramp anyway during rehearsal room, which then put us behind for 4-5 days in rehearsal room, because it had to be done and we couldn't use it until that counterweight had been added.
So I guess on that vein of mistakes and mishaps, what is, if you don't mind sharing, what is the biggest mistake that you've made in your role, and how did you fix it? Did you fix it, Adrian?
The biggest mistake that I have made was on tour. It was on the show that Martin mentioned. It did cause something to go wrong, and it was one of the flats. I pressed the wrong button on the automated control, and up until that point, there was no safety feature. So it was once you've pressed that button, it happens, and there's no. So it was almost until it was human error, and until you get to that stage, it wasn't really thought of being a problem.
As always.
And then when it happened, then a safety feature was put in. So then you had to push 2 buttons, hold one down and push another button at the same time in order to be able to select it. And also physical safeties were then put on the device as well. So if it did go early, it wouldn't go. Nothing would happen to it until you release the safety and then operated the controller.
So in some ways, your mistake led to the show becoming safer.
Yes, which I would say generally is sort of like at least more than half the time is how health and safety comes into play.
Yeah,
something has to happen for it to be thought of and for procedures to be put in place.
Ashley?
One of mine was on the inheritance, and it was just simple human error. I was running the automation, and instead of lifting the stage, I dropped it. So people walked onto a stage that was lower than they expected. Only by a small amount, and we rectified the error and carried on. But it never injured anybody, but it was just simply my mistake.
So when COVID hit, obviously, I think everybody thought that things could change. Did you think of changing careers as COVID hit, or were you dead set on coming back to do what you currently do?
I wasn't set on changing careers when it first started, because I thought, like a lot of people, we put the tour into storage that I was on, and we all sort of we had a beer afterwards, and we all went, oh, we'll see each other in about 6 or 8 weeks when this is all blown over. That was back in March. We were thinking our tour was meant to run till August, so we thought we would just be, we'd miss 2 months of the tour and then be back on for the end of it. So we thought we were all going to see each other again, but never did.
I'm the same. I never debated doing anything, changing a career. I've done other things in lockdown, but always knew that something would come back.
I also think we kept being handed little dangling carrots that we might be getting back soon, and so I haven't really thought about it. And then we go to at least 6 or 7 shows were meant to restart in the West End start of November, and obviously that all went and was pushed back to December immediately when lockdown 2 came in.
Yeah, you're right. There's always been little nuggets. There's always been some show somewhere doing something, like the Bridge Theatre had many shows, but really quickly, didn't they? Like in that kind of hope of, oh, if they're doing it, somebody else will.
I've loaded Six the musical into. I've loaded it 5 times now into trailers, and it's not actually opened yet.
And my housemate's on a train back as we speak.
We went so we put it onto trucks when it was meant to do the outside tour or tour of, and then that got pulled. So
on the kind of
the West End, and then that was pulled.
It is
crazy. And now it's in Manchester, but they're just ticking.
Yeah.
I guess on that kind of sentimental vein, what's your favourite thing about your job? What's the one thing that sort of makes you go, yeah, this is definitely worth doing?
It's just the show in general. Like live theatre is what I've always wanted to do, no matter what role I'm doing, as long as that's happening. Seeing the community that we have with everybody in the cast and everything, just as long as everybody's happy and having a good time, how can you complain about your life?
Yeah, live theatre is so sort of like infused with so many different people and so many people doing different things, different personalities, different characters, and just being there and in amongst it. And live theatre as well is sort of like, because you never know what's going to happen. You think all's lovely and going well for the first 20 minutes of the show, and then suddenly, God, you've got to go and do that. You've got to go and do this. This has happened. Quick, how do we solve it? What do we do?
As well as having the stage management side, where the cast member is crying on your shoulder because she spilled a coffee outside. You know, it's wearing so many different hats at the same time,
and also
realizing in between.
Yeah, and sort of like part of like not mischief as well, sort of like playing around. We did a whole tech rehearsal, and all we did on stage was we just put 4 cones out and tape around it. We didn't say to the cast that they couldn't go into it or whatever. It was there for no reason, but they did part of the rehearsal and just walking around it until someone said, "Why is that there?" We just, it's just left alone.
I mean, that's a good cast.
Yeah.
There's also the games you can play with the cast, like a good game of aisle tennis ball. You know, why not?
Oh yeah.
So, as a student myself, and I mean, we're all students and graduates here mostly. If one of us was to want to be, if one of them saw exactly what you did and went, I want to do that, what would you say the steps from here are? Most of us are in training. Most of us are sort of, or have just graduated from training, or have been to university and done, stage management. What are the steps from here that you think are the really key points to take, or do you think it's more fluid than that?
I'd say your last comment. I think it's quite a fluid motion. It all depends on your background and your mentality. You know your heart of hearts if you're a technical person, and if you can absorb those skills. But like I said earlier, always watching and listening, and like nobody's first job is going to be as a technical stage manager. It'll be as a work experience or as a DEP or as an ASM, and then you can just ask the questions at the times.
And it's understanding that. A few people that I went into, that I was at uni with, come out of uni and haven't done much work because they've come out of uni and have been applying for production management roles or stage management roles and things like that. And they were like, you've done all this work over the years and I haven't. And I was like, but what have you been applying for? I went in as my first tour. I was Alex number 2 that I started. Wasn't even in really a department that I sort of like knew I didn't want to go and put my full career in, but it was a way of just getting a step in the door. And I've never
because
looked.
then you learned how the room works as well. It's never the same as at university. When you're still on a stage with a lot of people that have been doing it for years, it's terrifying on the first day.
So
But
it's
also
main-
to not be worried about getting a tour or a West End job or this big musical off your first bat. Like I was lucky in my first show, but then for the next 3 years I ran a fringe theatre, which I learned a lot of technical things from that as well.
So it's maintaining that kind of humility, because I guess, you know, lots of us have been doing, you know, relatively advanced roles within the drama school sphere. But then, you know, as much as you can learn at drama school, I think you're right in saying that it is that kind of learning from others that becomes key. And I guess it varies by company, right? You know, you're learning different things from different people as you go through roles. So would you say starting as something like an ASM, possibly a tech swing or an assistant carpenter is a good way to go from? Is it? I guess it's just getting a springboard into being on a show, right?
Yeah.
It depends on what you are as a person. You know, if you've got carpentry skills, then yes, work with a carpenter and then find where you want to fit. Just because you've studied one thing doesn't mean that's what you want to do necessarily. Like you can change your path with all these skills that you're developing.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a sort of fun question, what's your favourite show you've worked on? Maybe that's a difficult one. But what's your favourite show that you've worked on, and why? Ashley?
One of my favourites was Alice's Adventures Underground. It was an immersive Alice in Wonderland. It taught me a lot about time coding. We had 18 entries a day on a Saturday every 10 minutes. And the show ran for that many times. We had 38 casts and 38 puppets, and casts not knowing where they were going. It taught me a lot as a different style of stage management, knowing what time this specific white rabbit should be in this 4-hour spectrum. Ridiculous. I've never used a stopwatch so much in my life.
My favourite show I think I've worked on is Privates on Parade that we did. We were doing it in Brighton. Who doesn't love a drag queen on top of a tank?
I mean,
You know. Yeah.
So it's
different
quite
shows
interesting.
have their elements, so
Yeah. So actually,
they all
like,
find a place in my heart.
so no. Drag queens on tanks sounds incredible. To be fair, I first in line for the revival. Actually, like, would you say that your favourite show then? It seems slightly different in regards to Adrian's answer. Your favourite show seems to be the one that was the most challenging for you. Would you say that's a common theme? Do you like the challenge? Is that kind of something that you thrive off of? And Adrian as well, I guess. Is the challenge something that you need to keep going?
Yeah, I thrive off a challenge, but yeah, that show was difficult to get off the ground. But when you were running it, because it was so difficult, gave so much back to you. It was so heartening that you did it. You were proud once you got this certain cue in the right place, because you only had 3 seconds to get to the next one. You know, it's
Yeah, and I think also, like, does that play into your kind of your typical career path in the sense that you're doing those shorter runs? Is it the rehearsal period and the rush that really gets you, or is it because you're able to do more of what you do on those shorter runs?
I think the way that I kind of carved my role in a shorter run. There's not always a rush in a rehearsal, so you have 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks, to figure something out and make it the best that you can make it.
And then Adrian, do you find that challenge is something that you need, or are you kind of more driven by something else?
A challenge. what I'm driven by is knowing that always trying to improve on something, making it the best that it can be, but knowing that the best, when you get to the best that it can be, that it's not the best that it can be, because there's always something that will come along in a couple of months that you might learn and then think, oh, I can then apply that into that, and then that will be even better. And then another 2 months might pass, and then something else comes, and then that you can add it in. That's why I like doing. That's why I like doing the tours for, sort of like for like a year at a time, because you can just over months just build this product that is sort of like so good, like really good, and run well. And then, like for instance, I loaded the play that goes wrong into the truck, ready for our tour next week. And I saw, even though I've not toured it for the past 5 years, all my handwriting and everything still on the back of the set, and like about labels about which end goes into the truck first, what the travel edge is on the scenery, and sort of like bits like that. So it's nice to know that sort of like what I've put in place 6 years ago is still there, being used now.
Get a lot of pride in knowing what you've done makes it work.
It's really interesting, actually, like that your kind of working methods massively interplay with the work that you're doing as well, and I guess it is in that sense, now you've developed your careers, you're able to find your niche and what you do best. Would you say that's a common thing with most stage managers that you know? Would you say that most stage managers have found their kind of specific niche? Is that something that most people do, or is that something that you find is slightly different?
I think it's a niche. You find your niche that you prefer, but not always what you do. In a way, like you find a lot of stage management that only do that their niche is musicals, but they will do plays, and vice versa. It's a complex role in a way, because the skills that you have for either area, what you're doing, will work both ways. You just find out what you prefer to do and what makes you happier.
With me, I also like to change. So I've normally try and get on a play, and then I'll try and get on a musical, and then I'll go back to a play following contract, and then onto a musical, to swap and change, because different shows have different challenges and they run differently.
The only thing that I find in a lot of times is if you're a tourer, you're a tourer, and then if not, if you're a venue, you're a venue. A lot of the time, but I could be wrong from the people.
So, I mean, I guess this is more of a question it's a question for both of you. What is the one thing that you can't live without day to day? I mean, Adrian, you were saying that you're going to bring a blender on tour, but
I mean, I've got ridiculous now about and it changes as well. Sometimes it changes on my mood, really. Sometimes on tour I will take sort of like barely anything, just enough pairs of underwear for the week and a couple of changes of tops and whatever. And then sometimes I will take everything, the kitchen sink. So I'll take my PlayStation, projector, sort of like blender, kettle, sort of like everything with me. Yeah. So.
Does it depend on what you think the show is going to be like? The more challenging the show, the more stuff you pack, the more home comforts you need to get through.
Yeah,
is it more the company?
And then it's also to do with company. If everyone else, we're stuck with a lot of boring people for 12 months, and I'll take the PlayStation.
You check your cast list and work out whether you need the coffee machine.
Yeah.
I mean, take note of that just in case you see a PlayStation.
Ashley, what's the sort of the one thing that you always have with you?
I think there's not necessarily something I always have with me, but something that I will always do before a show is go out on my own, go for a coffee, go for a cigarette, go for a little walk around the block. If you've had that stressful day, just getting out before you get back in, I find always the best thing to do.
Yeah, make
Just
the
nipping out.
most of the light of day,
Yeah.
because you don't see much of it. So it's always nice to be a bit.
I was so annoyed yesterday that we were in tech and it was the first nice day. I went out for lunch and it was sunny. I got so annoyed.
Yeah.
While I remember, if anybody else has any further questions, please do pop them in the chat. I mean, if not, we'll sort of wrap up soon-ish. So if anybody's got any sort of more things that they'd like to ask, then please do. I'm not clutching at straws, I promise. I do have more questions, but is there a specific thing that you take into tech? Do you have I mean, everyone has a tech snack that they love. What's your go-to? Is it Percy Pigs from the train station, or is it, do you have a specific?
Oh, I mean,
for tech,
coffee.
The tech I take, I've now started taking lozenge sweets with me because I spend most of the day shouting. But that's because you're stage manager. You're still doing the stage management role of running tech rehearsals, so a lot of shouting and telling everyone to stand by ready.
Mine generally just be coffee, to be honest. Have a good source of coffee within the venue, so you don't have to go out.
Yeah,
somebody brought an espresso machine in. Yes, please.
So you're gonna cop onto Adrian's espresso machine the next time you're together. Breaking into the flight case.
You'll find us
not got his PlayStation with him.
Yeah, coffee, PlayStation, projected on the stage right wing. That'll do.
What's this blue light coming?
That's
just on the psych. Yeah, lovely. So Sarah has asked, what piece of advice would you give to students graduating next year? I think also it's worth opening that up. What advice would you give to people who've just graduated, and also people who are graduating, who are sort of in an uncertain period of what's going on at the moment? Is there something specific that you'd say?
I'd say at the moment, be strong. To be honest, it's not going to be easy. It's never easy, but it's going to be harder at the moment.
Patience.
Won't be able to get a placement and
patience. I know it's going to be difficult, especially the play that goes wrong tour. The rule that we've had on it, everyone that's been employed this time on it has to have already done the show before. So everyone on the show has already done the show before. That way so we're only rehearsing for 4 days because everyone's done it. So it should be a glorified rehearsal period because everyone's done their roles before at some point. So it's just refreshing, and that's so that they can keep the costs down. So it's only a week's rehearsal, room fee for them to hire for the week. So things like that. There's going to be a lot of I think jobs.
While being patient, remembering why people aren't necessarily allowing placement students in, realizing why, as you're saying, that they're looking after the people that have already put their time in, which sounds horrible, but also then they don't have to get another COVID test done because it's cost money and all of those levels. But to use that time to develop a skill in some other way, no matter what you want it to be, even if you are doing a different job, what can you take from that job that will help you as a stage manager? Because I don't know of a skill that you can't transfer into being a stage manager at the moment.
So it's nothing personal. But those jobs you're applying for. But also, I guess it's those companies do have to look after the people that they've dealt with for ages, because those people have been out of jobs for a very long time, and the roles will open up, I'm sure. It's just that kind of interim.
That and to look after themselves is the thing. I think the biggest thing would be the work placements that won't be allowed for for quite a bit of time, I don't think. Again, I was in a tech yesterday, and I've never seen less people in an auditorium in my life. And if you're in the, like, even when the shows on front of house and backstage aren't allowed to meet each other, they can't use the same stage door. They have to use different doors to keep COVID different places. So if somebody back of house was positive, then front of house can carry on working on a different show. It's not locking down an entire venue. So there's just so many different complicated rules that people are doing to try and make this as short as time as possible.
Would you say also that given the fact that these companies have been shut down for a while, it's going to be that the stage manager or a graduate stage manager is asked to do more when they do get into the space? Do you think that the roles will become, you know, as we were saying earlier, it's easy to slip into that kind of thing where you're going to be doing more, but I guess as the smaller jobs come back, do you think that because money's tight, there's going to be more expected of the graduate, or do you think it's going to be similar?
Hopefully not, because there is things being put into place by the powers that be, by equity and things. It means that trickle down doesn't happen. At the moment, in the rehearsals that have been happening in a lockdown that have been allowed, yes, the ASM was also in charge of temperature checking, but that just also means that they're making sure that the person's in the building. It's kind of a mixture of the two. But when there has to be COVID secure people, I believe what's happening at this moment is it should be a different person.
And I think, you know, theatre in at its core is kind of inclusive, and I mean, from the outside, it seems that people are genuinely trying to get people back in the room and back on the shows. I guess it's just sort of waiting out that period of time where we're sort of trying to sort of work through things.
All producers are trying to do their best of getting people back. That some are being sensible by saying we're not opening until this time, but the others are going, yeah, of course we'll open something small in the meantime. It's a waiting game for new people that are just graduating, and a waiting game for the people that have been there for 25 years as well, to be honest.
Fab. So sort of to close, before we do any sort of final words or anything, I'm gonna give you a bit of a challenge. Define your role in 3 words.
Easy.
Go on, Adrian.
Technical stage manager.
Yeah, fair point, well made.
I was going for it keeps changing.
Yeah. Lovely.
That's better.
Nice. Fab, thank you so much for coming. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we go? Because this is actually the last one of the sessions currently planned. Obviously, this has been recorded. If you'd like to access the recordings in the future, then please do feel free to email Martin. It'll be on a case-by-case basis. But is there anything else that you guys want to say before we wrap up?
I'd kind of say, at the moment, from my experience, if I was you watching this and looking in, or looking at these whole as a series, I wouldn't try to define what my role was going to be before I graduated or before I started in the industry. I'd hold off for a little bit and then be fluid and happy to go wherever you want.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many roles in theatre that sort of are like a spider web of all interact. So you could end up anywhere in the next 5 years, sort of like, and yeah. So
it's keeping versatility in what you do.
Yeah, but also go with your gut and be happy, you know.
Fab. Thanks very much, guys. I think it's been a super informative session.